All right, we're just about there.
Yeah.
All right, we have our FarmerCon XVII presentation next with Rick Lai, Scott Eckert, Frank Schildiner. And they will be talking about Lord Grandrith. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
All right.
You win the prize.
Caliban and Lovecraft. Our Lord Grandrith was Phil Farmer's version of Tarzan, and Fiction House's version of Tarzan was Kygor, Lord of the Jungle. Originally I was going to ask what was Kygor's real name. He was like Tarzan, he was orphaned in the jungle, but we're not sure what his first name is. I couldn't find it on the internet, and I forgot to look it up. So my question is, what science fiction writer edited Jungle Stories? You want another one?
I'm guessing Jerry Bixby.
Jerome Bixby?
Is that right?
Oh my goodness, he's won two.
Wow.
Jerome Bixby, he also wrote for Twilight Zone. He wrote The Billy Mummy, It's a Wonderful World, right? And then he did about 4 Star Treks. So I thought I was going to add those clues, but Darryl came through for us. So on with the show.
All right. And Rick is going to moderate for us, and we're going to talk about Phil Farmer's Secrets of the Nine books and series.
Yes, we have a series called Secret of the Nine, which was created before the Wandering Universe, but and was totally separate until this novel. So perhaps Lynn, you could explain the previous novels in the Secret of the Nine series.
Sure. So the first book that Farmer wrote came out in 1969, called A Feast Unknown, and it may be well known for controversial reasons among those who have read it. A gentleman who was the editor at Essex House Books in the late 60s commissioned Phil, and he was actually commissioning a lot of science fiction writers at the time to write porn on the side. Phil had the guts to write the book under his own name, whereas the rest of the folks were writing and making good money on the side, but under pseudonyms. And Phil decided, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I'm going to put my name on it, and I'm going to do something really innovative and kind of genre breaking. And so he came up with his Tarzan analog, Lord Grandrith, and his Doc Savage analog, Doc Caliban. And by the way, he loved these characters. He loved Tarzan. He loved Doc Savage. It was done out of love. It's parody, but with a lot of serious themes and tones to it. But it's done out of love, and a lot of fans have really decried what he did over the years in the book, and said, "Oh, you've crapped on my childhood and ruined Doc Savage for me and ruined Tarzan." And whether they felt that way or not, that was not his intent. He loved these characters. So he wrote basically his version of Tarzan versus Doc Savage, which is Lord Grandrith versus Doc Caliban, and they were both beholden to a conspiratorial group called the Nine, who were a group of immortals and had been manipulating history and secretly controlling many aspects of the world for tens of thousands of years. They had an immortality elixir. Grandrith and Caliban become inducted into the ranks of the Nine and get the immortality elixir. one of the 9 dies, and they're looking for a replacement, and so they set Grandrith and Caliban, or Tarzan and Doc Savage, against each other to fight for this open spot on the 9. It's ultra violent. There's a lot of sexual imagery in the book, and I think that was kind of Farmer's intent, was to sort of send up the pulp genre and just, you know, amp up that sex and violence, which were really undertones in the pulps anyway. He followed that book up with 2 books and an ace double called Lord of the Trees, and on the other side was the Mad Goblin. So Lord of the Trees was a Grandrith only story. The Mad Goblin was a Doc Caliban only story, but they both took place at the same time and were kind of referring to events that were going on back and forth in those books. Those books were written as straight adventure, still very violent, not quite as violent as the first book, and without all of the sexual aspects to it. And so that's it. So for a very long time we had the 3 books in the Secrets of the 9 series. In 1983, Phil Farmer at the World Fantasy Convention presented and read from, and was published in the convention booklet, an outline of a 4th book and a proposed chapter, so that text has been out in the world for a long time. He called the follow-up book The Monster on Hold, and it was a Doc Caliban focused book. As part of our exploring of Phil Farmer's files, as the FarmerCon folks and the Meteor House folks, we discovered additional content for a Caliban novel, 3 more short chapters and a lot of notes. And so all of that material, the original outline, the original chapter, and then more chapters we found, and scanned notes and handwritten notes, all informed the completion of the 4th book. Because unfortunately, Phil Farmer did not complete it himself. We don't really know why, but the estate allowed me to complete it using all of that material. So that's the Secrets of the 9. It's basically Tarzan and Doc Savage versus the secret immortal rulers of the world.
And after he wrote the Mad Goblin and Lord of the Trees,
Yeah.
he wrote some biographies on Tarzan and Doc Savage.
Right.
And if Frank could talk about those, because they created the one universe.
Well, you have to start with the premise that the Walt New Universe is, whether you like it or not, it's a separate universe unto itself, where it uses the idea of an event that may have altered the genes of a series of people in England. And from there, between the people that were affected by this meteorite strike and just the general, amazing human beings that came from before the genetics, created what you would basically think of as the closest thing to superhuman without being superhuman. Doc Savage, Tarzan, Shadow, he took the chance to best expand the world and give it almost a underlying storyline. There's a metafiction to all fiction, is the way Phil did this. And by doing it, he made a really interesting idea of people that are related to each other, not just because of names. In fact, Wynne really rejects that a lot over the years, and it's been good that he does. It's about greater conceptions and abilities and concepts. And he created some characters on his own. A character named William Clayton had a lot of part to that, and connections to characters like Fu Manchu, and even going as far into the present as, say, Travis McGee and Lou Archer. So it's a greater metafiction of all fiction. And Phil did this, and it's fun. We take it as enjoyment. Some people take it as the closest thing to Satanism. And we've been dealing it he deals with it more than the rest of us for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who really enjoy the concept, and there's some that don't, and that's great. It's interesting.
But it's not a religion.
Well, it's not a religion. It's something that we enjoy. It's just another subset of fandom. But it's kind of weird because sometimes, like, we have a fandom that then says, well, your fandom, being fans of this Wold Newton thing, that sucks. Your fandom sucks. And I'm like, well, but weren't you beat up in the 1970s when you were a kid for reading, you know, whatever, right? So it's weird.
It's a weird toxic thing that pops up, but over the last few years it's gotten less because we pay attention less.
But that's okay.
And it's much
We'll let them. So I think one of the points maybe where Rick was going to was that he outlined the Wold Newton family in two biographies.
Yes.
One a biography of Tarzan and a biography of Doc Savage.
Tarzan Alive and Doc Savage's Apocalyptic Life.
So these were different takes on Tarzan than on the Lord Grandrith and the Doc Caliban.
They're totally different characters in the sense because Tarzan, Doc Savage, and all that are not raised in a world that is run by 9 immortal evil beings that literally spend their entire time messing with the world in every way, shape, and form. In fact, one of the discussions that they had in one of the 9 books is they're talking about how they were considering arming the Native Americans before the Europeans got there, just to create this really powerful, then they just said, forget it, we'll just let them die. You know, that is the way they've done it, and you realize that these immortals, who in many cases are based on immortal concepts of mythology that he drug from, like Ing and the rest that are almost just mentioned in the Lord until we got there.
Yeah.
These characters are not benign immortals like you would like them to be. There are blood-soaked evil beings who have really kind of both evolved beyond human and gone deeper below human at the same time. They're very combination of almost prehistoric and inhuman at the same time. And as such, the world of the 9, the secrets of the 9th world is, it's harsher than a pulp world. It's worse than a pulp world. It's much more dangerous and violent than a pulp world, and it could be better because Doc Caliban in the first book, A Feast Unknown, has revealed that he has all of these amazing things that could save the world. He even gave to the 9 in Lord of the Trees. It's realized they have a tent that you could literally just take it out of a small pack, flick it, and it's done. You have a full tent right there. And that was a Caliban invention probably in a weekend. And that's the kind of things the world could use, but you're never gonna get it, because it's the 9s.
There's one thing quickly, in case there are any Top of Bundy fans out there, and you're wondering if the 9 are connected to the 9 unknown. They don't seem to be.
Agreed. Yeah, they don't really appear to be. I tried to read the 9 unknown once.
It's very, the 9 unknown is really a theosophical concept, and if you're like, then great, enjoy. I mean, it's not even really close other than the word 9. Yeah. I tried, and other people have tried to mythologically put them together, and other than the word 9, I just don't see it.
Now, Lovecraftian concepts enter the picture, but they first entered the Wold Newton universe in Doc Savage's Apocalyptic Life.
Correct. So, as part of his Wold Newton genealogy, Phil included Robert Blake as one of the Wold Newton family members, and of course, that was sort of the take on his good friend Robert or Bob Block.
Yes.
But he was a protagonist of H.P. Lovecraft's The Horror of the Dark.
Yes. Yeah. So it's sort of a double homage, right? Because and then I think there was another Cthulhu mythos connection that he put in.
Johnny.
Yes.
Johnny.
That's how can I forget that part? So in the Doc Savage biography, Phil proposed that the protagonist of At the Mountains of Madness, who's called Professor Dyer, in the Lovecraft story was really Johnny Littlejohn, who was one of Doc Savage's fabulous 5 A's, archaeologist and geologist on the Antarctic expedition.
And there's even a third one when he suggests, and this is, could be or couldn't be, when he suggests that Doc Savage was Negretti from the thing from another world.
That is a farmer.
That wasn't Farmer.
That was a farmer.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
See?
We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Well, I know when to back off.
No, it's all right.
But to go to the Johnny
Yes.
point of view, Phil doesn't explicitly say this, but I think the argument was based on 2 things. William Harper Littlejohn in Lester Dent, William Dyer in Lovecraft, similar name.
Sure.
And there's also, Lovecraft is an extremely long-winded writer, and all his novels uses big words like man, writes like Johnny. So there's enormous in-joke.
Right.
But the thing that I've always had a problem with that theory was he said the Miskatonic expedition, Farmer said the Miskatonic expedition occurred in 1928, or 29. 29. When it occurs in 1930, 31 in Lovecraft's novel. And I'm not sure why he changed the chronology, but I don't see any reason to.
I think, so my speculation, my guess is that he bumped it back so that it took place before all the super sagas started, because there might not have been time for Johnny to have this 6-month or 9-month Antarctic expedition.
Man of Bronze was like occurring in 31.
Right.
Johnny would be coming back.
Right, yeah.
I don't personally accept Johnny as Dyer.
Yeah.
We all have our little.
We all have our interpretation. Even if we're fans of Walt Newton and Farmer, we still have our I believe this part, but not that part, but that's okay.
Well,
Yeah, it's good.
The name William was identified in Lovecraft's shadow out of time. It was the Miskatonic expedition led by, including Dyer to Australia. And I did the Doc Savage chronology, and I just could not fit into this Australian. But I can get around it a little bit by saying maybe William Dyer is the uncle of William Harper Littlejohn, who is mentioned in, good grief, I forgot it now, Mystery Island, a Doc Savage novel. The uncle is given the nickname of Ned, but maybe that is the real Lovecraft connection.
Okay.
Could be.
Very good.
Now, to get to who goes there, it started with Al Tonic, who was writing articles in the fanzines in late 70s. And I believe it is in the Doc Savage Club Reader number 6 that he wrote an article called A Doc Savage Adventure Rediscovered. And he looked at Who Goes There, which John Campbell wrote in 1938, and analyzed the hero of that novel, who is named McReady, and he is described as a man of bronze. He has a beard, unlike Doc. He has bronze eyes, and he's 6'4", which is the actual description of Doc's height in one of Lester Dent's novels, The Man Who Was Scared. That is an interesting theory, which you modified a little bit.
I modified it a little bit.
Tell us how you modified it.
So, I backed up the time of the thing from another world, Who Goes There, and placed it before the Super Sagas, because in Who Goes There it says that McReady is studying for his MD, I believe. It doesn't have it yet.
He actually said he got the MD.
He had his MD?
He had his MD, and he was preparing for a fellowship, and he changed over to meteorology.
Because he was a meteorologist and
He did change his direction of studies, but he had gotten his degree.
Gotcha. So, in Phil's notes for The Monster on Hold, he explicitly, he comes out and he says that Edgar Allan Poe's narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which involves some events down in the Antarctic, that Verne's Sphinx of the Ice Fields is a sequel to Arthur Gordon Pym, that Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness is specifically a sequel to both of those, and that The Monster on Hold in turn is a sequel to all of those. So I proposed that Doc, whichever Doc you prefer, right? Doc Caliban, Doc Savage, Doc Wilder, went on, I adopted the theory, Altamic's theory. He was on the Antarctic expedition, and was McReady. So that theory is incorporated in here. And then the Mountains of Madness expedition happened. And so there's a lot going on in the Antarctic in the history of these books.
Al originally put it in the 30s.
Yes.
And there's a reference to cyclotrons, which is consistent with the 30s.
Unless they had cyclotrons in Doc Caliban's universe in the 1920s.
But this only occurs in Doc Savage, in Doc Caliban universe. Now we're getting into the multiverse.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. I also just want to note that there's another. I'm sure there are many Doc experts in the room. There's one Doc expert in the room that independently came up with the McReady. He had not read the Doc Savage Reader 6, and so that happens in research.
Something
hey,
from the
Chris.
same story.
So there's a multiversal aspect to it. So Frank has talked about the Wold Newton universe as sort of the more straight versions of Tarzan and Doc Savage, and then we have these other versions in the Nine universe. And without providing too many spoilers, the book gets into a multiversal aspect. So there was a fan, there might have been two fans in the 70s who wrote Phil a letter. The history is a little bit unclear. There's at least one fan who wrote a letter after the Mad Goblin and said, "Hey, why don't you have Doc Savage versus Cthulhu?" And Phil kind of was like, maybe that's an idea. Well, he actually ended up running with it, and so in The Monster on Hold, he kind of created his own version of a Lovecraftian entity. So he didn't literally use the same creatures or entities that are described in the Cthulhu mythos. He came up with his own entity called Shrask, and Doc Caliban and the other Doc are both touched by dreams and nightmares by this creature, and they're drawn to a very deep cave system in New England. And it just so happens that they both had been drawn to that same cave system back in 1948. So they both had sort of a parallel adventure in their parallel universes back in 1948. And now it's 1984 and they're being drawn back. And for those of you who have actually read the whole Doc Savage corpus, that's a reference back to the final Doc Savage novel, Up from Earth Center. So not only is this a sequel to all the Lovecraft books and the Poe and so forth, but it's very explicitly a sequel and kind of a resolution to, obviously a non-official resolution, but a Farmerian resolution to the final Doc Savage novel, Up from Earth Center. And it also functions as a sequel to Doc Savage Escape from Loki, which was Phil's authorized Tarzan novel about young Doc Savage.
You said Tarzan.
Doc Savage. Escape from Loki. It's late.
I just figured I'd help.
Thank you.
Now, even though he does not appear in On the Monster on Hold, Frank created a new character
Yes.
in the Grandrith runnage.
Yes, wow, I can't believe I wrote it. This, what happened was, I've always been a fan of the Nine, even more so than Walt Newton. I just always thought that that was an amazing universe. And I proposed to take place in the same world, but to take place at the side of what's going on. Wynn is writing the grand events, dealing with the Nine, dealing with the Lovecraft, but the characters that are the heroes and villains of this world all became what's called candidates of the Nine. They're the people who are living long periods of time. We see a character named Murtaugh, who is kind of maybe the son or is Moriarty. I mean, there's a lot of this in there, and there's a lot suggested. And my proposal to the Meteor House guys, and they accepted, was to have stories that take place to the side of it. A candidate taking on the candidates of the Nine, the power that is holding up these immortals. So I created this character, Langston DuPont, name change by him, but it's a good name change.
Thank you.
And they changed the name to the title, which was really good, called It's Always Darkest. This is it. And it's the character Langston DuPont is the Dark Avenger of this world. He's not the Shadow, he's not the Spider, he's not the Green Hornet, he's not Black Batman or any of them. He's all of them and none.
Not the Green Llama, too.
The Green Llama too. There's a lot of martial arts because it's me. But he's all of them and none of them. And he has a deep connection to the actual Nine. And there's also a little bit of the Eastern Zen philosophy thrown in with him, because he realizes, after seeing their very selfless events by going after the Nine, that all of his good was actually just, a fake way of hiding the fact that he's as impure as everybody else in this world. So he decides to take on a character named Seiko Midori, who is his female partner. The male and female partner up, and there's certain ones that are kind of assigned to each other. And Seiko Midori is based on a woman from ancient Japan. Ancient, really, it's 17th century. There was a woman who was the daughter, the niece of a man named Nobunaga. And she ended up becoming the second wife of the man who united the whole country. And she was known to be beautiful and brilliant. She ended up getting killed, but it was, I said, well, there you go. And that's the kind of person the Nine would want on their side. We're beautiful, brilliant, dangerous, and willing to do anything for them to keep alive. So he's taking on her power base through the use of, well, the things you would expect from a Dark Avenger type, plus somebody crazy like me who does martial arts still. So there's a lot of that in there. And I even use the second greatest swordsman in history in it, a man named Sasaki Kojiro, who was considered maybe even the best, who lost a very famous fight to the greatest swordsman, Miyamoto Musashi. So there's a lot of this stuff in there, and it's a lot of action because it's me, I write action. But it was a lot of fun to write, and I was grateful, and well, the cover's fantastic by Keith over there. It's a beautiful cover. First hardcover I've ever done.
Oh.
Never had a hardcover before, so I was real proud of this.
Yeah.
The master of my karate school especially loves this cover. So it was a lot of fun to write, but it also gave me a chance to kind of give a little bit of an expansion to the Nine world without doing anything that could upset the overall framework that Phil Farmer created. That was important to me. You got to keep it the way it is. So if anything big happens with the Nine, he could be involved, but he's always going to be a second-rate player to it because I want it that way. So there you go.
One little interesting trick that you do in the novel is, I read it carefully, and I noticed that the villains were all cast as if they were really played by a Hollywood actor.
Oh, yes. I'm not even hiding that. It's all based on 70s and Hollywood right there in my brain. Oh, no. There's a character in there, and we were talking about this on the drive, which makes it 10 times funnier to me. On the drive, I'm driving with Rick, and he turns to me and says, "That biker character, that was William Smith, wasn't it? You know, Big Bill Smith." Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's him. That's him. William Smith, for those of you who don't know, you probably have seen him many times. He was in Any Which Way You Can with Clint Eastwood. He was in a dozen biker movies. In real life, he had a master's degree in Russian language. He was an Air Force intelligence officer, a black belt in Kung Fu, and held a bench press record for like 20 years or something like that. He's a real all-around tough guy that when you see him, you'll recognize him. And he has literally the best fight scene in Hollywood history. There's a movie called Darker Than Amber with Rod Taylor. And Rod Taylor, as some people might know, he was a very tough Australian guy, and he liked to fight. He was good at it. And he saw this big, American guy, and he said, "All right, let's see how tough you are." And they really fought. And you see the movie, William Smith broke Rod Taylor's nose, and Rod Taylor broke his nose. It was real, it's on camera. Don't watch the rest of the movie, though. The movie's terrible. But this part of the movie, I watched it at the same time as Stephen Barnes, who's got like 30 years more of martial arts on me, and we're both like, that's the moment. I see that nose break. We're both watching it on separate ends of the continent, but it was really kind of cool. So yeah, everybody is based on something like that because I was trying to pay tribute to the 70s in my own sort of way, and I had a lot of fun doing it because I watched all those movies despite my parents not wanting me to.
One interesting aspect about putting a Lovecraftian and interpretation on Up From Earth Center by Lester Dent is, I don't think Lester Dent ever read Lovecraft, but there is a plot element in Up From Earth Center that may have come from a cosmic horror novel written by somebody else. At the end of Up From Earth Center, after they got into this cave and see these living trees, living boulders, all weird sort of creatures, there is some speculation that they hallucinated the whole thing due to an underground gas. And there was a best-selling horror novel in the early 20s called, I think it's either The Thing in the Lake or The Thing from the Lake. I think it's The Thing from the Lake, but it may be in instead of from. And it was written by a woman who normally wrote romances. Her name was Nancy Ingram. And the novel has a plot that's similar to the Dunwich Horror, in that there is this monster, it's semi-visible, in New England, who is mating with human women. And in case you're wondering, Lovecraft's letters reveal he read it around 27, I think. And Dunwich Horror wasn't written until 1928. And there are similarities to a fragment he wrote called The Round Tower, which was sort of another Dunwich horror type story, which Drolitz made it the lurker at the threshold.
That's really interesting because there are definitely the Dunwich horror was also an inspiration for some of the elements in the Monster on Hold, as was the lurker at the threshold. And speaking of Up From Earth Center, some other elements from that, if you read Up From Earth Center, if you have a chance to read it, and you're sort sort of baffled by it, go back and read it again. Kind of make a list of the unanswered questions that Dent leaves hanging, because there's a lot of them. And we try to implicitly answer those questions in the Monster on Hold. Like, so the key to the puzzle, some of the mysteries that are sitting in that last Doc Savage novel, the answers are in the book. They're not explicit, we don't bang you over the head. You kind of have to put the puzzle pieces together. But for instance, there was a character, Mr. Whale, and he suddenly appeared in this cabin in a schooner, right? And he suddenly disappeared. Well, how? Why? You know, how did that happen? We explain that in the book.
Now, even though this Sharask, is that the?
Shrask, yeah, Shrask.
Right. Even though that name does not appear in Lovecraft.
Right.
And that would be true of the Dark Caliban universe, because it's different, but you have the regular, this other Doc,
Yes.
who, if we are to believe Farmer, had connections to the Mount Semantics.
Correct.
How does Sharask fit into Lovecraft's hierarchy?
So Shrask is basically a female Yog Sothoth with elements of Shub-Niggurath. So out of time, out of space, sort of in this nether, you know, not affected at all by normal time and space. And you know, it was clear from his notes that was kind of the direction he was going, as well as just from the descriptions of Shrask. You know, if you were looking for a Lovecraftian entity analog to Shrask, just based on the descriptions, it would be mostly Yog-Sothoth.
Now, Yog-Sothoth and Shub-Niggurath are husband and wife,
Yes.
according to Lovecraft's letters.
Yes.
There is a reference to this in the Mound, but Yog-Sothoth is called the not-to-be-named one.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's a whole history of other entities being called the not-to-be-named one. You think of the themselves. So probably a mistake of interpretation. But you could view Sharask as Yog-Sothoth and Shub-Niggurath mating and forming briefly a composite entity.
Mm-hmm. And Shrask also has offspring who are twins, and that's kind of where the Denwick horror aspect of it is inspirational as well.
In the Mound, they have Nugget Yevon, who are the twin of Septimus.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, it all works together. By the way, when Rick gives you these things, he just will reel off things you've never heard of in your life. Have a pad nearby, because he's always got, I was 6 hours and I wish I had a pad writing down all the things he was telling me on the way that I could have. He's the best.
And it's all in his head. It's amazing.
It is amazing, and it's a pleasure.
Unbelievable.
It's a pleasure to hear it too.
You record on the drive home.
Well, we are.
One would think I would have done that, right?
Yeah. Now you know.
Yeah, I'll still make a mistake, I forget.
You also threw in, some other novels by Phil. And you did something.
Figure this out.
You did something nice with the Dark Caliban universe. You put in the novels which are very far removed from events in the real world,
Yes.
and made them part of the Caliban.
Yes. So I decided that I theorized. So Phil lived in LA in the mid to late 60s. When did he move back to Peoria? 70? 71?
Right after the moon landing.
Okay, so 70, right? Late 69 or 70. So I call it his LA period. And his LA period also encompasses his porn period, right? So he wrote other books for Essex House, Image of the Beast and Blown, didn't end up getting published by Essex. It was originally contracted by Essex, and then it moved over to Brandon House called Love Song. So I decided that all of these books from the LA period and that were, you know, sort of these underground books that you would buy and carry home in a brown wrapper, all took place in the same continuity. So I threw in references to Image of the Beast, Love Song, and then I threw in a reference to one of his unpublished books from the 70s. It's now been published. It came out from Subterranean Press, well, originally in Farmer File, which was our fanzine, or prozine that we did. Mike, Paul, Chris, and myself participated in that, and we presented it in 10 parts over 10 issues up from the bottomless pit. Then it was in Subterranean Press, hardcover, and now we have soft covers of it sitting in our VA House table, which is kind of like a disaster. It's like a 1970s disaster movie, you know, like Airport or The Poseidon Event, except it's about, you know, a giant oil accident in LA. Again, another one of his LA stories. So I tried to provide some continuity with some of his books and the Caliban universe.
There is a very obscure connection to a Cthulhu mythic story that Bill Farmer did called The Freshman.
Yes, there is.
That story.
Yeah.
You want to elaborate on that?
Sure. So in The Freshman, and I can't remember the exact, but the name is Denbron, and there's a Denbron sigil, or, you know, an artifact that is used in the Monster on Hold.
It was the marquee of Denbron, and some reference to a source.
Yes, in The Freshman it was, and then and this was, yeah, exactly. And then in the book there was a sigil or an artifact.
Apparently named after.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is I kind of forgot about the Freshman reference. So Denbron appeared in his notes, and I grabbed it from his notes for Monster. So that's his connection. He did that. He was making those connections himself, and fortunately I saw it in the notes and was able to use it.
Now, Frank, are you going to do anything more with the hero?
It's up to me to your house. I'm happy to write another one. I mean, if they want it, they'll get it. I'll write it this year. Yeah, I have actually a second idea involving kind of subterranean adventure, kind of, you know, one of those secret hideaways in the middle of the Andes or something like that. You know, something to talk about. I'll talk to them over the weekend if they're interested. We'll talk.
Okay.
It'll just understand it's going to have a lot of action. If you don't
Sure.
like action, don't read me. But yeah, there's actually I talked to Wynn when we were in the process of creating it, and I had an idea of a character, a real one that's become. There's a character called By May, who is the same character played by Gordon Lau in Kill Bill 2. And he kills that character. Actually, Gordon Lau, when he was a young man, fought that character in another movie, so it was the reverse there. He was playing the character he once killed. He is based on a real man named Bach May, who invented a very unique style of fighting that involves maximum amount of punishment in the minimum amount of motion. And well, he was a real person, and well, I was thinking of having him as one of the villains in the story, just to give you a concept there. And also involving, there was a character in real history who was supposedly the son of Ivan the Terrible, called the False Ivan. And they don't know whether he was the real son of Ivan the Terrible or not, but he disappeared. Some say he was murdered, some say he wasn't, and I'm thinking of him as probably involved too. So just thoughts, random stuff. I'll talk to them about it, but I hope so.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, it's I'm always thinking of something.
Chris,
I just had a question.
Chris has a question.
So if the Essex House books are part of this continuity,
Yeah.
does that bring Trader to the living in all also.
Yeah, it probably, yeah.
There was a
Be a good
connection.
Yeah, so Image of the Beast and Blown, and it's a trilogy. The third book is called Traitor to the Living. And Traitor to the Living is very different from the first two books, but involves the same character.
It's not quite clear how they connect. It's sort of like he says in Traitor Living he was on drugs during the previous adventures.
Yeah, but he definitely said, there's one line where he definitely says, that used to be my name. Now, this is I have a new name now, yeah.
The whole amnesia bit, which honestly it's usually my least favorite idea, but Phil made it actually enjoyable. But most amnesia stories are just plain stupid. I'm sorry. It's just, but he made it really good. I really enjoy all three of those books.
And, you know, saying that the first two books were sort of a hallucinogenic, you know, drug-induced nightmare, and certainly possible. I mean, just very briefly, the events of the first two books are attributable, or attributed to aliens, but in the second book, there's actually a different explanation. So the explanations for what's happening shift through all three books. Definitely highly recommended stuff if you're really into some deep, kind of twisted farmer.
Yeah, it's a form of cosmic horror without the tentacles and all that nonsense. Because you really don't
But there
know.
is a snake.
There is a snake, but that's not a tentacle. But it's just nice to have a cosmic horror that doesn't just rewrite Lovecraft for the 100th time, and that's really how I think of those books. Because the mist and all that stuff.
Yeah, the green mist.
The green mist and all that stuff, and they play it really well.
We're trying not to give too much away, and also we can't like say a lot of these words.
That's, that's why we're being really obscure. We
Right.
get it.
Well, I think we reached time.
All right. Well, Rick, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
moderating, and thank you for writing the book,
Thank you for letting me.
and thanks for listening.
All three of you.
We appreciate it.